Well, good evening, this is Handlock Steve wishing you a very pleasant evening. And somebody sent me this article and I think it's well worth doing a video on because this is a situation which seems to be going on worldwide. And this is basically the takeover of our governments by unelected bureaucrats. And this particular story is about a major decision about environmental testing around the tar sands, but everywhere I look, in our own municipality, ever since we've had this outbreak, the council in New York 2nd abdicated all of their responsibility and handed over the keys to the family farm to the CAO. So the CAO now makes all the major decisions in the city of Kawartha Lakes. And there is a huge issue with this. Firstly, that they are completely unaccountable. Secondly, they cannot be fired. Thirdly, they get an incredible salary with incredible benefits. And, as far as I'm concerned, if you're making the decisions, guess what? You get to carry the can if those decisions go wrong. But the last reason, and probably the biggest reason, is the fact that all of these CAOs and senior staff members in the government were all indoctrinated into the technocratic government building courses at university. And this was done actually very cleverly. This is a plan that's been in the making for at least 100 years. And this is where foundations like the Carnegie Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation started giving donations to universities in exchange for having one of their people on the board of the university to make sure that the money was properly spent. And of course, properly spent means following ideas and ideals that the Rockefeller family believed in and supported. And so, of course, being big technocrats, they had this whole technocratic dream of what the world would look like. And so they supported brilliant students who were in favour of this view of the world. They then became professors. They then taught all subsequent students, and of course this process carried on where they would indoctrinate again bright students who followed this philosophy. And so we now have basically a carbon copy government executive, all in tune and all on the same page with Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 and the technocratic dream. Anyway, let's just read this article. It's not very long, and I think you'll agree, like me, it's actually pretty scary that this kind of decision making has been handed off to these unelected bureaucrats. Okay, let's pop over this article and we'll come back and I'll do a quick wrap up. Okie dokie, here we go. And so this article from the Star, which is the Toronto Star. Alberta, Ottawa reduce oil sands environmental monitoring budget due to outbreak. And this is August the 4th, 2020. Edmonton. Alberta has come to an agreement with the federal government that makes major cuts to environmental monitoring of the oil sands. The deal, a copy of which has been obtained by the Canadian press, lays out research plans for this year's field season under a federal provincial program that oversees all monitoring of the area outside of company leases. Signed July 7th by top bureaucrats in Ottawa and Edmonton, it reduces funding by about 25% from last year's budget. This year's budget has been cut to no more than $44 million. The approved budget was $58 million in 2019-2020, although about $52 million was spent. The deal says no field work is to be done on the main branch of the Athabasca River. That means the program won't fund monitoring downstream of the oil sands, even as the province considers proposals to allow the water from oil sands tailings ponds to be released into the river. The agreement also says there'll be no field studies on wetlands, fish or insects. A pilot project gauging the risk posed by tailing ponds has been dropped. Water quality assessment in the Wood Buffalo National Park, part of a response to international concerns about environmental degradation at the UNESCO World Heritage Site, is gone. Under the deal, administrative costs have ballooned to more than 10 million from about 7 million last year. That means nearly 1/4 of the monitoring budget will be spent before a single data point is collected. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. 10 million from about 7 million last year. And what is that being spent on? You know what? We don't know. It will be internal hiring, no doubt, and salary increases and benefit increases to the uber chiefs in the bureaucracy. A federal official said Tuesday that much of the budget cut is due to the outbreak. We have missed part of the field season, said Kevin Cash, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister of Science and Technology with Environment and Climate Change Canada. He said a substantial part of the spring and summer season was lost, which makes up most of the reduction in costs. Cash added that the decision to cut the budget was made by a 12-person oversight committee that includes 6 people from Indigenous communities, as well as representatives from industry and the provincial and federal governments. The monitoring programme, initiated in 2012 under Stephen Harper's Conservative government, funds research by outside organisations as well as government scientists. Between March and the middle of July, Alberta's United Conservative government and the province's energy regulator also suspended a wide array of monitoring activities required of oil sands companies as conditions of their operating licences. The outbreak was cited as the reason for the suspensions. Jess Sinclair, Press Secretary for Alberta Environment Minister Jason Nixon, said in an email Tuesday that budgeted funding does not reflect what is actually spent, and the funding amount this year is in line with average spending in previous years. The $43.9 million approved for oil sands monitoring in 2021 reflects the expected cost of monitoring required to assure immediate public and environmental health, long-term monitoring and focused activities across the areas of air, water, wetlands, wildlife and vegetation monitoring, she said. Jim Hebbers of the Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute says his funding was cut to $1.4 million from the usual $4 million to $5 million. Field monitoring is the biggest component of what we're not going to be doing this year, he said. The work around monitoring for amphibians, birds and mammals, that work won't be undertaken. Nor will work on tracking indicators related to plants or changes in habitat. Hebbers said that he was told the cuts were made to protect workers from CV. Bill Donahue, a former senior civil servant with Alberta's science and monitoring programs, said leaving the Athabasca River unmonitored is crazy. We've got one of the biggest industrial developments, the primary problems of which are contamination of the environment and consumption of water, and there's no downstream monitoring. The federal official said it's an evolving issue. Oh yeah, that's what they always say, it's an evolving issue, and some water quality monitoring could resume as CV restrictions are eased. Now, I don't quite understand why CV has anything to do with this. These people work alone or in small groups of 2 and 3 people, testing, getting samples, this kind of stuff. It's absolutely outrageous that none of this monitoring has been done, and this particular branch of government has been shut down when there is no good reason. And it's all because of these CV protocols are blanket protocols, and nobody's making any common sense decisions here. This is why you're supposed to have, God alone knows, politicians don't make common sense decisions either, but that is what the politicians are there for, is to interrupt this and say no. We need that testing to take place. You can wear a hazmat suit, you can wear whatever you like, but that testing is going to take place. Alberta has a binding agreement with the Northwest Territories to keep track of what's happening with the Athabasca, which flows into the territory. Jocelyn Uzenbrug of the Territory's Environment Department said her government was told a deal had been reached. We were not provided with any detailed information about the budgets, he said in an email. The Territory has made its concerns known about the suspension of water quality monitoring in Alberta and continues to advocate for all monitoring to resume, especially the oil sands monitoring programme. Marlon Schmidt, environment critic for Alberta's NDP opposition, pointed out the provincial budget set aside at least $50 million for monitoring paid for through an industry levy. I feel I've been lied to, he said. He said the cuts aren't likely to help the image of Alberta's industry. It's critical to protect the environment. It's also critical to show the world we can develop these resources responsibly. We're failing at both. So what I find really interesting about this article is that, we as the public, we want to have a nice clean environment to live in. We like to go and walk in our parks. We like to fish in our rivers and lakes. We like to go boating. We like to enjoy the environment as much as possible. And we want our politicians to look after the environment as much as possible, especially public use areas. And we usually get pretty upset when our politicians don't do this. Well, I think that this article is pretty revealing that it may not be the politicians who are behind it, but the mandarins who are guiding and advising our politicians. And of course they are in charge of the present condition that we find ourselves in. And again, this is looking like it's going to turn into an unmitigated disaster. And the inability for the health officials to follow even simple charts and keep their story straight is absolutely stunning. And this is the danger of handing off to these senior bureaucrats. When you have no skin in the game, you don't make the same decisions. Okay, because you know that you can have no responsibility attached to your decision. You're going to make the wildest decisions possible and not always in the public benefit. And all of these senior civil servants, their loyalty is to the system, to the bureaucratic system or the corporation in the case of municipalities. That's their first responsibility, and addressing public issues is second on their list. And that's why we have a council. That's why you have people who are elected by the people to represent them, to moderate the wishes of the people against the needs of the corporation to run with services like water, sewer, road building, cleaning, sweeping, whatever it is that the municipality has to do, garbage pickup, so on and so forth. But right now we don't have that balance. And because these senior mandarins have managed to wheedle their way around the rules, they have bit by bit taken more and more power and authority away from the politician. And they've even changed the procedural bylaw for our councillors, where it actually says that no councillor may talk to a member of staff. They could only talk to the CAO, and the CAO takes that message down to the particular staff member. Well, of course, this is now second hand, and because councillors cannot talk to any member of staff, there's no way of following up on this to find out whether it was appropriately dealt with, whether there was a reprimand or what have you. So basically, just like Europe, just like the EU, this is the technocratic dream come true, where it's all bureaucrats and there is no public input whatsoever. So please, I would urge you to be very, very, very careful about what you vote for, because anybody who's pursuing these kind of policies and is not keeping our bureaucrats accountable is not somebody who you want to have as a politician. We need politicians in there now that are going to put their foot down and make sure that these bureaucrats, these civil servants, start taking on some of the responsibility for their actions. Most notably recently is the Phoenix computer program. This is a payroll program to pay their own staff. Okay, this has been a complete boondoggle. We're now at $5 billion and counting, trying to rectify the errors in this computer program. Literally thousands of people, thousands of civil servants across Canada have not been paid or overpaid or haven't got benefits. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. And the two senior civil servants that oversaw this were transferred to another department. Absolutely outrageous. Anyway, as I say, please remember, folks, be careful who and what you vote for. And at this point in time, it really is worth doing a little research on the underlying forces in government, because I'm starting to think that the politicians have very little power at all and the bureaucrats have it all. Okay, well, if you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant evening, and we'll talk very, very shortly. See you now. Take care. Bye.